all of you. Like Namrata said, over the next 1 hour, 30 minutes, our focus is going to be to delve deeper into, how do we support systems and large-scale skilling systems, learning systems to get ready for the new realities that COVID has thrown our way. And how does one navigate through some of these infrastructural, cultural barriers that exist? And given the magnitude of the change, it will require support from a lot of the different players and stakeholders in the system to make this happen. And I think what may have been the reality of learning, maybe 7, 8, 10 years down the line has really been fast-tracked because of the pandemic. And none of us really had that time to prepare for it. So I think we're all trying to figure ways in which we can pivot quickly to some of these newer realities. So that's what we're going to explore for the next 1.5 hours. We have a very amazing speaker lineup. Since we have 5 speakers, we're going to sort of divide the panel into 2 parts. The part 1 is going to be a conversation with representatives from the government. Part 2 is going to be a bunch of other organizations, some of the practitioner organizations, and I'll invite them in a bit. But before I invite our first set of panelists from the government, I just want to quickly take a few minutes and set the context for the conversations today. We all know that India is a very young country. Everyone's been talking about the demographic dividend that India has. We have a population of 139 crore people, of which 60% people actually fall below the age group of 35 years, which makes it almost 83 crore people who sort of fall into the bracket of so-called the young population. And it's very important, as a nation, as a country, for us to support these young people in their skilling, building a certain growth mindset so that they can contribute meaningfully, not to just their own life journeys, but even to the larger society and the country as a whole. So looking at that, looking at this reality, we all know that the industrial training institutes are one of the largest skilling systems in the country. In ITIs currently, and ITIs actually have the outreach to the remotest part of the country. You all know that almost pretty much every district in this country has an ITI. We have about 15,697 ITIs in the country, which almost has an enrollment of 26.5 lakh young people. The seating capacity is still 36 lakhs, but we do have 26 lakh young people already studying in it. They train young people on both manufacturing, non-manufacturing sectors and jobs and livelihoods within these spaces. But the unfortunate thing that remains is that it still sees a very low proportion of young women who study in these ITIs. So one of the problems, definitely, and I think one of the panels later in the day we'll also explore this conversation, that how do we increase the enrollment of young women in the ITIs, especially. So given all of these current realities and the amount of young people that we're talking about, and the kind of readiness we require as learning ecosystems, we do want to understand that, what are some of these barriers that exist which are preventing us from actually embracing some of these changes. So, these are some of the barriers that I'd want to talk about very briefly, right? So we've sort of divided these barriers into 2 parts, the infrastructural barriers and the cultural barriers. When I talk about the infrastructural barrier, while I think the whole access to internet, smartphones have increased tremendously in the last 2 years, especially post the pandemic, but still, if you look at the numbers, only 45% of this country has access to internet, which pretty much makes it just 62 crore people have access to internet, which makes it like more than 50% people who still don't have access, right? And as we talk about this, right, the problem is at multiple levels, right? One, a lot of people don't have access to devices itself. For the ones who have access to devices, they don't have access to or have the ability to continue to recharge their phones on a very regular basis. The one who are able to recharge probably don't have very good connectivity, right? And all of these things become really big deterrents for learning to happen remotely and virtually in the times of pandemic, and really impacts the population in a big way. I think the other big thing has also been that, especially during COVID, and I think post-COVID as well, a lot of the higher ed institutions have still managed to get good infra, but I think ITIs have still been left behind a bit in this space in terms of being able to have access to good tech infrastructure in that space. And also, like, there is a lack of good teaching learning material, especially from a digital format perspective, right? And especially, I think the other thing that stands out in the space of ITIs especially is that a lot of the training is actually technical and practical and requires young people to work on machines and all of it. But how does one do this when you're stuck at home, when you're trying to do things virtually? So what kind of technologies can one use to actually train young people on these technical skills when they're not being able to come to institutions, right? And if I talk briefly about the cultural barriers, right? Like here in the ITI system itself, we talk about more than 1 lakh trainers, right? And these trainers are not used to training in blended models. They're used to training being in the classroom. So it requires a lot of effort and readiness at the level of these trainers to actually embrace these practices, right? So it's a skill shift, and more than skills, I think it's the mindset shift at some level that is needed. So that's the other big barrier that we need to speak about. For young girls, especially, we understand that while the access is lower for a lot of people, especially from the poorer socioeconomic backgrounds, but for young people, beyond this also there are other social barriers, right? So family may be able to afford a phone, may be able to afford internet, but does does that girl or the woman in the family have access, right? So what are those social aspects that still prevent these young people, and especially the young girls, from having access, is something we would like to explore through this panel. And lastly, not the least, but for the trainers to thrive and for a system to work, right, there are so many different players which make a system, right? So it requires readiness at multiple levels, at the levels of government officials. There needs to be changes in processes, systems at various levels, and a really, a shift in mindset, some sort of really reinventing the learning processes in some ways is what we require, right? So how do we really bring about some of these mindset shifts is what we want to sort of explore through this panel as well. Basically, we at Quest have been definitely thinking about this problem a lot, and we realize that the magnitude of the problem is so big that it'll not get solved with one agency or one organization's role, but it really requires a collective action with different stakeholders, to really come together, join their energies, join their strengths to make things happen. So we started the idea of Future Right Skills Network about a year and a half back. It's a collaborative between the Ministry of Skills and Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, the State Department of Employability and Training that we work with. So they're a big part of this engagement, and the focus with the ministry is that how do we really introduce tech engagement strongly? How do we look at trainer readiness in the system? So they are an important stakeholder. We have Accenture, Cisco, JP Morgan as our donors who've joined us. They really care about working in the ITI ecosystem and looking at changes at a large scale. We look to work with a lot more practitioner organizations who may be embedded in different states, working with different state governments, state departments of skilling, to come together and work together. And Quest sort of holds the network secretariat together to speak to bring all of these entities together and plan for some of this action around this front. And we also want to have a thriving knowledge and innovation community as part of the network, which looks at innovative solutions, looks at doing research, looks at doing trends mapping, looking at piloting prototypes, really looking at the knowledge management for this network, right? So the idea is that how do we bring all of these stakeholders, from government to private companies to civil society organizations to influencers and knowledge community, to really come together and join forces and have a collective action. And the idea really is to transform the ITI ecosystem to enable 21st century skills for young people, build institutional capacity, train the trainers and leadership in the institutions, right? So that's what we want to do, and that's largely the mission of the FRSN network. So with this background in mind, in terms of the kind of barriers culturally, infrastructurally that we're sitting on, I would like to now invite our first set of panelists, the two officials from the government. I'd first like to invite Shri K. Veera Raghava Rao. He's an IS officer from the 2007 batch. He's currently the director for the Department of Employability and Training in Tamil Nadu. He holds a BTech in Computer Science Engineering and has an MA in Public Policy. Prior to his role with Skills Department in Tamil Nadu, he has held multiple portfolios as a district collector for Ramananthapuram, Thiruvallur, and Madurai. He's a renowned IS officer bestowed with numerous awards and accolades for various path-breaking initiatives across districts. So yeah, very warm welcome to you, Sir Shri K. Veera Raghava Rao. Could we have you?
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd also like to invite Dr. N. Jayaprakashan, ISDS. Dr. Jayaprakashan has over 30 years of experience in research and development, imparting skill-oriented training to industrial technocrats and youth to help upgrade their skills in the field of electronics, embedded controllers, computer communications and interfacing, process control instrumentation, industrial automation and networking, and IoT. He's currently serving as the head of IT Cell with the Directorate General of Training, Ministry of Skills, Development and Entrepreneurship in New Delhi as part of the Government of India. He has authored 16 technical books for ITIs, 12 scientific publications, and also has a patent for a device in his name. He's a PhD from Anna University in the field of crystal growth and process instrumentation. Lot of heavy scientific stuff, but very warm welcome to you, Dr. Jayaprakashan, to the panel.
Thank you. Yeah, very good morning to all. And I am also very good morning to Veeraraghava sir. Yesterday, I have seen your speech on how the Tamil Nadu is improving on the skill development. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm super glad, and all of us are very happy to have you both join us today. So without further ado, I'll jump on to my first question to Veera Raghava Rao sir. I'd want to ask you that in the state of Tamil Nadu, right? Tamil Nadu is very well known for its performance always, right? It's one of the top 5 states when it comes to especially the work in ITIs. The enrollment in Tamil Nadu is 65%. As opposed to 55%, which is the national average. The national grade in Tamil Nadu is higher at 1.77 versus 1.23, which is the national average, right? So I'm sure there are certain things Tamil Nadu is doing right, and especially the DT. So what we would love to hear from you, if you could talk a little bit about that, how is the State Department of Tamil Nadu, the DT, is getting ready for this shift around the learning processes post the pandemic? How are we looking to navigate through these infrastructural barriers, the cultural barriers that I spoke about from the trainer readiness lens, parents' mindsets, government officials? So just would like to hear from you in terms of how are you navigating through this and what are you planning to do or already doing? Yes, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Nikita, for a very warm welcome and a very nice introduction. Thank you, Dr. Jayaprakashan, to be part of this discussion, and all the participants who are online. Morning to everyone. Very happy to be part of this. The group of Quest Alliance has been doing wonderful work in association with us. So accordingly, they wanted us to be part of this discussion and share the how Tamil Nadu government is doing in running ITIs. You are all very well aware, and our Dr. Jayaprakash is also there. Tamil Nadu is, we have 90 government ITIs, around 489 private ITIs. All are doing very well. In DGT is a continuous guiding force for all the ITIs across the country. And our ITIs have been faring very well. In the national level ranking itself, Tamil Nadu is part of the top 10 states. And we have around 5 government ITIs in the top 10 in the country. Tiruchendur, Madurai, Namakkal, Tiruchi and Ulundurpet. And even our private ITIs are also doing very well. 3 finds a place in top 10 best ITIs in the country. And our enrollment rate is very good. If you say last year, almost 22,890 people have been admitted out of the allotted strength of 26,512. So that is the level of performance. The reasons for the performance, as usual, state of Tamil Nadu always is a forerunner in the country. A lot of schemes, like we have a lot of schemes which encourages, all of us are very well aware that ITI students most of them are economically poor. The second, academically also poor. So we need to train them very well and we need to support them because of their poor economic background. So our state is having a policy of giving a lot of encouraging freebies to retain the students and support them. Our tuition fee waiver, we have a stipend of around 750 rupees per month. We give free books, uniform, shoes. And not only that, we are giving a free cycle to travel from home to the institute. And above all, to the context, to match the context, we give free laptop. So every student who have been studying here, if they would not have finished 12th in the school, they will be given laptop here. If they would have finished 12th in the school, they will come here with a laptop. Every student practically in ITAs are having laptops. That is the infrastructure preparedness of the state. That is very, very important. The COVID-19 pandemic has completely shifted, a paradigm shift in all the activities, processes, businesses, the way we deal, work culture, location, everything has changed. Not only teaching, it's business, way of life in business, way of life in learning, the way of life itself has changed. It's a new opportunity which has been thrown by the new challenge across the globe. We have well used that. All our ITAs have been doing online training. ITA primarily requires a practical training. So the blended learning is very, very important. All our trainers have been taught and they have been showing the models and practicals online. It was a little difficult. Whenever we had a gap given by the COVID, the institutes were running. So we have to pursue like that. The COVID is giving us a gap in the spells of waves. So the learning has been, we were opening institutes for some time. Presently, institutes are open. They were given more practical learning emphasis. When the institutes were closed due to prevalence of disease among the community, that time we were doing online coaching. For that, every student has been given a login ID. Every student has been given, already they're having laptops. And we have created hubs for, particularly we have 6 exclusive STITAs in remote areas. For that hub we have created where they can learn from there. So like this, we have around 10 ITAs have been taken as virtual classroom hubs, particularly in the regional centers, where they can use that facility to reach out to the students. And every ITA is having smart classrooms. And the content has also has been blended. It has a digital content, e-content has been prepared. And when we were discussing in our interaction last time, Quest has come out with a new idea of phone library. It's like cell phone library, where you have set up in Pulambadi, Madurai, and Dindigul ITAs. So we were appreciating that. Though all of them are having laptops, those who couldn't have, nowadays everybody is having smartphone. Those who couldn't have, we have that library where one can engage the phone and learn. So these are all the ways our ITAs in Tamil Nadu state have introduced to acquaint all our students and train us to the modern challenges and modern opportunities. Definitely this we have to continue. A blended learning is very, very important, not only because of the pandemic. It gives an ample opportunity for us to learn from remote. A lot of best practices are there across the globe. Once our students, our trainers are practiced to this blended learning, even if we don't have COVID pandemic compulsions of closing the institute, we can continue this methodology to get the best practices across the globe, best knowledge across the globe. We can view the models straight away. All these things, particularly the industry is now demanding a lot of high-end trades, technology intensive, so much. Technology is booming like anything. See, necessity is the mother of invention. It's a very age-old quote. COVID made a challenge for all of us. Necessity for the humankind to thrive. We have invented so many new methodologies. So this is an evidence of that. So definitely this opportunity which we have created out of the challenge will be used for the future to better our learning. That's all from my side. So we see this as an opportunity. We see this as an opportunity to learn. We see this as an opportunity to improve our skills of teaching and learning. We see this as an opportunity to grow well by acquiring knowledge across the.
So, sir, if I could just ask you a very small follow-up question as well. You spoke extensively about the infrastructural aspects that Tamil Nadu is thinking about. But what about the trainer readiness? How are we looking at the trainers getting ready for like a blended learning opportunity, and how are you looking at building that mindset shift more than the skills, given like a lot of the ITI trainers are there in the ITIs for a much longer period. They have a certain way of teaching and learning. So how are you working on that piece, sir?
Inner readiness is a challenge. Reasons are two. One, the nature of our trainers. Two, the kind of the content we have to teach. Nature of our trainers, they're all little aged group is there, 50 plus, 45 plus. They were never used to this gadgets, not very much used to using systems, not very much in internet access. So not used to teach on offline. Forget about trainers. Myself, I am more comfortable in speaking directly than participating in a video conference. Around some 223 people are participating. You have to visualize 223 in your front and speak in a system. It's a challenge. I want to tell you, I'm not just an IAS officer. I'm a BTech computer science graduate who has finished my computer science in 2001 when the technology was peak. It's almost 20 years down the line. So, because we are not used to it, but we are compelled to do that at this present juncture. Again, I'm quoting, necessity is the mother of invention. We have to do it. That's how we have convinced all our trainers. Yes, little difficult. We could able to train them. We could able to find master trainers among our ITIs. We could give them. DGT also has helped us with the content preparation. All this has been taken. That is one aspect. Second aspect is the type of content which we are dealing with. It's more practical oriented. The boys and girls requires a lot of hands-on experience. So whatever we say, the hands-on experience cannot be matched with the digital learning. But we have no other option. So when we closed the institutes, we were focusing more on the theory. When we have opened the institutes, we were focusing more on the practical. So this is how we could manage. But thanks to technology again, it gives us an opportunity to simulate. A lot of methodologies are there. It's this system, piece of computers full of so many opportunities and content of knowledge. We can upgrade ourselves to learn all those aspects where you will almost get a simulated experience. So the technology, we need to improve further. As of now, what we're doing is not adequate enough. A person sitting and seeing in the computer. Nowadays, surgeries are being done remotely by using the robot.
Right.
Doing a pile work or kind of Turner work, or this will not be equivalent to doing a hard surgery. At least here we have a scope of acceptance of the failure. There is no scope. Here, the precision is completely different. Their life, it's material. So when it is able to, is possible, it's made as possible. This can be possible. The only challenge is that we need to grow in learning technology, adapting the technological interventions and methodologies available to suit to our requirements. Definitely we can do that. We need to grow. The people are now ready. They have experience almost for about 1.5 years. So, and we don't know how long this experience is compelled to be there.
Right.
We will be used to this. Definitely we are seeing it very positive. We can do that.
Thank you, sir, so much for sharing the positivity and all the hope and saying that it is going to be a process, but we'll get there. Coming to you, Dr. Jayaprakashan, my question to you is that, with NEP coming into play, and I think only in July we completed a year of the National Education Policy. The Prime Minister spoke about a lot of readiness, especially from the tech infrastructure and architecture side. They spoke about the NDR architecture. We spoke about the EdTech forum, etc. So for me, the question to you is, when it comes to ITIs, how is the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, and especially DGT, looking at this readiness from a future perspective? How is the ministry thinking about the digital divide? How are we thinking about the trainer readiness? All of that. So, yeah, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nikita. What DGT is doing, you already focused everything on the presentation that DGT is running the 15,000 industrial training institute offering training on 137 trades. Plus, we have the seating capacity of around 34 lakhs. There, 26 lakhs are on roll. So, everything on behalf of DGT you have presented. First, I have to express my sincere thanks and congratulations to Vijayaraghavan sir, because Tamil Nadu is one of the leading state and is a role model for vocational education, because the government is already taking a lot of efforts and pioneer by providing the cycle, laptop, even the fees reimbursement and everything. From DGT, we appreciate Tamil Nadu, and even we done a grading of ITI, how the ITIs are current situation, how the quality improvement in the ITI can be taken. We have done a grading where in the top 10, Tamil Nadu is occupying the 7 institutes as a top role. So it's a role model. Moreover, yesterday and today, the same similar topic, there is a discussion is going on with all the state directorates. We also trying to understand the good practices followed by the each states to adopt across the country. So Tamil Nadu was doing it extremely in one end, and Himachal Pradesh was doing in another. Uttar Pradesh was making another. Assam was making it. So yesterday the state secretary. Today also the seminar is continuing. Now regarding the digital divide, see, skill is the main. Skill means learn by doing. There is no alternative for it. Today, as already Director Tamil Nadu has mentioned about the COVID pandemic and the necessity and need for the change, we already adopted it. Because we started in 2018 itself, the digital, when I reached Delhi, so we started the digital transformation. I implemented the e-office. I implemented the APR Sparrow into the system. I provided GOE mail for everybody, all government website with the GOE domain. So I started step by step. One initiative we made was Bharat Skills, a central repository for skills, because students should have the materials to read where it was available. Previously it was selling. So we made an initiative to make all the books, theory books, practical books, question bank, everything to be available to the students. So we introduced a Bharat Skills, where a website where all the students, courses, materials, everything students can download. In 2019, I started in September, I started it. Before pandemic, it was around 1.9 lakhs users. Today it's gone around 35 lakhs users. During the pandemic situation, around 20 lakhs users has utilized the Bharat Skills. Advantage, as you know, we cannot expect a network connectivity with all the places. Because even though you have a mobile phone, where is this network? And how to download it? There is a signal, and how many people have the mobile and other things. So this is a one click, they can download the material, they can read it, and they can, then the question bank and all we try. Second, skill is a one part. 60% skill means 40% to 45%, the employability skills. That's there is a soft skills plays a major role. That is how to work in a team, how to take a decision, how to take the responsibility. All these things, how to communicate, that is the most important thing, the spoken English. So we introduce the employability skills as a part of the curriculum for all these 24 lakhs of children. In a 1 year course, it will be around 160 hours, and a 2 year course, it will be around the second year 80 hours, so 240 hours. Quest has done an excellent job on Assam and other places. We have seen the Quest lab and all. My Director General, then Director Rajesh Agarwal seen. Then I started the collaboration with Quest, Cisco and Accenture in front of the main. So we signed an MOU with the Quest Alliance and Cisco. Now it is called Future Right Skills. So our MOU is extended up to 2024. Mainly, we need the industry support, because one of the major issue I face about the quality is our syllabus is common, examination is common, certification is common, but skill is differs from area to area, location to area. If I see my Tamil Nadu or if I see in Assam or other area, the skill delivered, because the delivery is one of the major things. How you deliver. So it depends upon the faculties, the trainers. Trainer is a major cause, because when the expertise trainer, he can deliver it in a better way. When the trainer is not knowing, he cannot. How to make the delivery as a standard? One way, we can remove the clutches from the trainers for the learning, empower the students. So we start a blended learning path. Self-learning with an assessment, so it guide automatically. Out of my 137 trades, top 6 trades like electrician, fitter, motor mechanic, diesel mechanic, computer operator and programming assistant, and a welder, and a diesel mechanic. These 6 trades occupies 80% of the students' capacity. Nearly around 18 lakhs it covers these 6 trades. So we started mobilizing, converting the entire curriculum into a digital mode. Okay? That is called blended learning, which have a extensive assessment of the students. If the student is wrongly answered, if he's not able to understand the concept, the system will guide them to go through it further. So that way, through Bharat Skills, we introduced this blended learning this year, so that it will help the students to learn with a standardized curriculum. And also, the capacity can be increased. The advantage is, students normally in our IT system, 7 hours, 2 hours will be theory and 5 hours will be a practical. Now students can learn 24/7 from the home with a mobile. They can spend full time in the laboratory, so that the teacher can act as a mentor. When you talk about the skill in that make in India or made in India, made in India, the technology will be some others we are manufacturing in India, like a Hyundai car and other. Make in India is a technology as well as manufacturing to be in India. When you want to become a make in India, there should be a makers of India. Our students are the makers of India. Our trainers are the mentors of India. So quality of trainers is the most important. So training, instructor training, we are introduced some OLCC online career contact classes also. Through now we are delivering to the online mode for improving the qualified trainers and other things. And we empower the students through the blended learning and also through BAL. Now come to the employability skills, where Quest being a leading partner in this area with the expertise of faculties. Initially, we started our national skill training as 8 NSTIs under modern employability skills as a pilot project, where I appreciate the channel partners by spending around 1.15 lakhs for each institute, providing the computers, Pi server, and the faculty, everything. Then later on, we extended to all our national, that's NSTA Women Institute, around 13 institutes, and continuously conducting the training program through the Quest partners. Moreover, the Quest is involved in the curriculum design along with the Tata Strive and various agencies with NIMI, and made the employability skills more relevant to the industrial requirements. Moreover, Quest is involved in making the books, employability skills curriculum books, first year already completed, available in Hindi, Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil, and Gujarati. Again, conversions going on. Second year books already completed, available in English, and the translation is in progress. We had a discussion with our Director General and last review meeting. Now, Quest is making the entire content in a digital mode, where blended mode. Out of 130 modules, Quest has already converted 80 employability skill modules into digital mode, blended mode, and the remaining modules are in progress. So by another 3 to 4 months, the employability skills will be available on fully digital mode, that's a blended mode, because we need support of industry, because government has sufficient funds. We don't want any financial support from other agencies, because we want industrial partners to be a matchstick to light many candles. Our master trainers are the candles which light many lighting to the students. So we need the technology industrial partner, your technology, your experience to train our master trainers, so that in turn we can train the students in other ways. So one way this blended mode of learning will enable us to standardize the curriculum, Kanyakumari to Kashmir, same method of delivery, what we are expecting, what outcome we are expecting from after undergoing this course like that. So that will enable the students a uniform standard across the country, and also it will be faster 24/7. And Quest also made the mobile app for the students for the employability skills, and more than 1.5 lakhs of students already registered on the Quest Alliance mobile apps. And Quest is working with the many states also. Quest is not only working with the trainers training and also management training of the principals. And also there is a placement training. That is the most important, outcome based. When you are talking about employability skills, then you should be able to get an employment also. That is the final outcome. So the placement officers training also Quest is making. So we appreciate the efforts partnering with the DGT and along with the states to digital transformation of the IT ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing all of the details and all the super amount of efforts. As young people indeed being the makers of India is something that definitely resonates. Just a follow-up question to you, Dr. Jayaprakashan, is that, we have representation from both Central Ministry and the State Department. Skilling is also largely a state subject in some sense, right? So the question that I wanted to ask to both of you, and maybe starting with you first, is that how is the Ministry of Skills Development and Entrepreneurship working closely with state DETs, and how do they really support each other? Because the effort is required at all levels, and both of you all spoke about what is the effort both the departments are making. But could you talk a little bit more about what will really make this energetic? What will really make it a very supportive relationship towards each other?
The question itself is different, because there is no difference between state and central, because central will never do anything separately, everything through states only. So states are our implementation partners. Central will provide only the policy and the curriculum standard and also the examination and certification, because this is the only certificate across the country, National Skill NCVT certificate. Now it is NCEVT, recognized certificate across it. Then if you go for an engineering college or a polytechnic, it's a region-based or a state-based.
Right.
But IT is the only system across the country, uniform, Kanyakumari to Kashmir, or this from Ladakh to this other area. So all are implemented through states.
Right.
Central will provide only supporting things, and they were only what we can say policy decisions only, but implementation partner is state. So it is hands and gloves. We have to work together only. What is the effect of state or central? Even whatever the states are doing, and we are transferring to the good culture, we are transferring. Some way to improve the IT system and all, we are supporting through the World Bank funding and other things to all the states. We are not having any partiality with one state or something. Whichever the states are doing, we are trying to improve it. But complete development are doing by the states, their own state, because they committed to the people, they want to develop the state. It is all done by the states. We appreciate them. So it is together. There is no separate that what states is expecting, what central is expecting. They cannot differentiate. We are together only, we are working. It is like a husband and wife, a family.
Sure, sir. I don't know. Sir, K. Veera Raghavan Rao, sir, if you want to add something to what JP sir just said, to the husband and wife relationship, if you want to add something, that what is the expectation a state would have from the ministry at a central level?
As Dr. Jayaprakashan has told, all of us are in the same line. Only aim is to improve the system of training for the students across the country. We are working in the state of Tamil Nadu, and particularly standardization, improving the syllabus. A lot of high-end trades are introduced. DGT has introduced a lot of high-end trades recently. It's a continuous process. It's like based on the industry demand, a lot of trades have been introduced, and all these trades are being taken up. So whenever it's a close coordination, feedback and improvement mechanism keep on happening. That's the reason why we are in a discussion mode yesterday and today. Yesterday also we have presented, particularly in this context, I want to bring one more aspect. You are in the chat box, I'm seeing some questions like women role of women, very, very important. In your presentation also, 11% is the percentage of women enrollment. Tamil Nadu is somewhere around 12. We have 10 exclusive women ITAs. We have women wing courses. A lot of new trades are there. You come to industry, they want a very cool workforce, which definitely we can expect for women trainees. So these are all the aspects which we are continuously working. The close coordination between DGAT and DETs are the main foundation for running our training system in all our ITAs. So new end courses are being introduced, more of industry partnership and bringing in new courses, and the old course syllabus is being revised. All these are all coordinated efforts. Right. So we are in one boat, traveling to improve the methodology of training for all the trainees, to improve the work culture and also supply required human resources for the industry. As he mentioned, make in India, right. Not made, make in India. So all our workforce only can have ideas. A lot of incubations, labs, ideas, encouraging new ideas. All these are happening. It's a coordinated effort.
No, that's great.
I will add you one point.
Yes,
See,
yes.
we signed an MOU with Quest and Cisco, that future right skills. It is not for DGT, it is for the entire country. That is all states and the principals. We are training the principals. We are training the instructors of the ITIs. We are training the students of the ITIs. So it is common. It's across the country. We are uniform to everybody, because that is a uniform education. We want to bring it, and we want to create a standardization in skills as well as a delivery methodology. That's the most important thing. See, when you talk about the quality, it's a continuous process.
Right.
If my kid is getting 80%, then I will say, why not 90%? If I get 90%, why not 95%? If you 95%, why not 100%? So the question will go continuously. So we are making a lot of efforts, continuous process and continuous improvement. And moreover, nobody knows the formula for success. If a film director knows how to make a best super hit film, everybody will try to make a best super hit film. It's a trial and error we are trying to make, whether this method will be effective or with this method. When there is a result, okay, we can adopt that method. So there is no standard foolproof system. This is a way of doing the things where it will give you a success. We try with the customer lines, we try with the other partners, how it can be implemented to the system. One day, ultimate aim is we want to improve our quality in the system.
Right. No, it's very super to hear both of you. There are a lot of very, very interesting comments and conversations on the chat box. I'm sure you're reading them too while I'm reading them. So I think you touched upon some of the responses already. I think one question that keeps coming back is about apprenticeships, and especially given young people are not being able to go to institutes for practical trainings. Also, like their, the readiness to really go and work in the industry. How do we really highlight the focus on apprenticeships? I think is something we talk about at Quest very passionately. But if any quick thoughts from the two of you or one of you even on that, I think will be very helpful. If there are any lived things that you're doing around that aspect.
A few points I want to add. One of the things which we come across yesterday discussion. If you go for a school transition data, for a 2014 or a 15, 3 years we analyzed. For a 10th standard level, around 88 lakhs of girl students are entering into 10th standard level.
Right.
And from 10th to 11th, around 55 lakhs of girls are migrating to the 10th to 11th. When I go for my IT system, only 73,000 girls only coming into my IT.
Yes.
Which is 0.83. Whereas when I come from boys, 8.7% and girls was 0.83. And the dropouts will be around girls side 37% of dropouts, nearly from the girls. What is the issue? We need the Quest and other channel partners regarding this support for this. Creating, because you are mainly working on women's empowerment. So we want to create an awareness. Yesterday I was telling, this will require a school and the ITI bridging gap. That is, we should have things, awareness and counseling and a mass movement. I remember when I was in a 4 years or 5 years, we have two enemies. One is a nurse, other one is a teacher. Whenever a school van is coming and a van is coming with a nurse, because they will put vaccines injection. So we'll run away and we'll hide in that. So induction means we'll have it. Second thing, the month of May or June, the school teachers in the vacation period, they will go to village by village, house by house. They will search the children and they will try to use the right hand to touch the left ears. If you're not touching also, okay, touching. Now he can be eligible for school admission. So they will take it to the jail, school. So, but that has created the illiteracy. It's avoided. The literacy has been improved like that one because all children are go to school. That's why the teachers moved to the vacation. Time has come like that only for ITA students because when you want to make in India, makers of India as students. So we want to, because I'm telling you, even engineering or a polytechnic or even an IT system, even there's two children completed BTech electronics and communication. Even a mobile charger is not working, is unable to repair.
Yes.
Even your microwave oven or a TV or a fridge in a home appliance, anything problem, we'll call service engineer. That service engineer is a 10th standard or a 12th standard only coming to the home and repairing, but engineers cannot able to repair it. Why? Because that same system is going on to the engineering college also. The faculty, the teacher who completed the BTech, then MTech or PhD, he became the faculty in the engineering college. He never seen the industry.
Right.
So he is a person going to generate future generation for the industry. It is like a blind will lead another blind. So those who never seen the industry is going to create the industrial workforce.
Right.
So that's what we are trying in the ITA level. 70% is a practical work. In the engineering or a professional course, weekly 2 hours, 2 classes or to 1 day or 2 day only a practical. Rest of thing it's a theory part. It's a knowledge-based training. But IT system we are adapting hands-on because that is called Industrial Training Institute. We are the one at the age of 18 producing the blue-collar workforce for fitting into the industries. Yearly around 13 to 15 lakhs of students are coming out to the market. So readily adaptable by the industry. The same industrial model we are following, shift by first shift, second shift, third shift also to adopt the industrial standard. One is creating awareness among the girl children to move to the IT system. A career counseling is one of the major area. Many states are following like Tamil Nadu and all, they're using the career counseling and other things. But some states we are trying to adopt that career counseling and how to create an awareness campaign.
Yes.
Through social media or something, how to migrate the women's candidates, how to avoid the dropouts of the school children.
Yeah.
30 to 35% dropouts are there. So if we increase at least 5% to the things, our ITA will be a better model. We can improve our productivity because resources are already created. Even my 36 lakhs of seating capacity, I am getting around 26 lakhs. Nearly 10 lakh seats are vacant, where infrastructure is already created.
Right.
People are not coming. Reason is they don't know awareness.
Right.
So that is one of the things. So we need the channel partners like Quest and all to make a mass movement against awareness, creating awareness among the school children for migrating to the ITA system.
Yes. And we need to have like maybe a close collaboration with the education department and start early.
Yeah, the idea our minister is now say minister for education, minister
Yes.
for skills.
That I think offers a lot more opportunity as well to have a stronger synergy between skills and education. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, JP sir. Just one last quick question to you, K. Veera Raghava sir, I think, and very quick response as well. Any last words before we move on and bring in the other panelists as well? Is it what did, according to you, should be the role of practicing organizations and practitioners like Quest Alliance or other civil society organizations, people like Samagra, somebody from Samagra is also on the panel, and even like companies like Cisco, Accenture, on how they can work with government departments better? Any quick response will be helpful. And then
a few points for particularly the organizations who are working in close coordination with all our systems. One is, as it's already discussed and mentioned, dropout rate is a serious concern.
Right.
After admission, around 25 to 30% are dropping. More are women. Admission of women itself is already we're working in close coordination with our education department.
Right.
Those who passed 10th, how many are entered 11th, how many of them have come to ITIs. All this we are working. So to attend various, as one good thing which during our last discussion also, family meets with the parents of girls, students and their colleagues, so that confidence is being given about the institute's facilities and awareness is being given about the opportunities.
Right.
So to improve women enrollment and women retention, to bring in gender parity, that is required. Generally, per se dropouts, we need to tune the students and retain them, giving them hope of good job opportunity. Second aspect is industry connect. Whatever we say, the institution and the systems, definitely the practicing organizations who are in coordination with various industries, you work out of the box. You go a step ahead, like beyond the systems. So definitely your ideas are welcome, and your work in coordinating, bringing in industry also is very, very welcome. Already all institutes are having IMCs, Industry Institute Management Committee as an industry partner. So we're very active, but still a lot we can do. Next aspect is our trainers are more focusing on technical skills and syllabus. We have placement cells, we have placement officer, employability skills, entrepreneur skills, group work, because all these are floor level workers, blue collar workers. They have to work in team, not as an individual. Even an individual CEO also has to bring in all his team members to run the organization. So teamwork is very, very important. So these skills we need to bring in. Yeah. So in these areas, you can work and to better our efforts. So good. Thanks for this opportunity. Nicely done and good interaction. Let's all do good work continuously. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Veera Raghava sir and Dr. Jayaprakashan. It's really, really nice to have you both. We're going to now invite the other panelists. You're most welcome to stay on the conversations. But if you have the other meeting that I know is running in parallel, so if you need to jump off, we understand that completely, sir. But thank you so much for making time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Hiran sir, for and it's a good opportunity to the public to reach about the DGT and our state vision, how the ITA systems are functioning, and what efforts the state and the central are taking towards improving the skills of the students, and how the digital blended learning is coming into the things, how our Bharat skills. So all we are working together with the industry, institutes, and the students to improve in a common agenda only. So thank you for this great opportunity.
And thank you so much, sir. We look forward to a continued collaboration with the state and the central departments. And thank you for all the support, and thank you for being here. All right. So with that, I would like to invite our next set of panelists. First, I'd like to call upon Kumkum Arora. Kumkum currently leads the Cisco Networking Academy program in India and APGC. It is the largest tech skilling program of Cisco Global CSR, reaching to over 2 million students every year globally. She has diverse experience working at the intersection of policy, technology, and social impact space. She has advised governments and startups for solutions in education and skilling across India and West Africa. She has a master's degree in education policy from Harvard University. She's an active podcaster and cares about politics of development and ethics of philanthropy. Welcome so much, Kumkum, onto the panel. Next, I'd like to invite Nikhil. Nikhil is a computer engineer by qualification and started out on his own in the theater, entertainment, and comedy industry. With a passion for working in the governance space, he worked at multiple organizations such as Janagraha, Foundation for Democratic Reforms, Border Road Organization, before he found his calling at Samagra. At Samagra, he has worked across 6 sectors in 3 states and central government. His longest stint has been in the skilling, employment, and entrepreneurship space with Saksham Haryana program. It's a systemic transformation program in the state of Haryana. He's also worked closely with the Ministry of Skills Development and Entrepreneurship to help put together a tangible roadmap for their Vision 2025. Really happy to have you here, Nikhil. Welcome aboard. And last but not the least, I'd like to call Senthil. Senthil is a development sector professional with 2 decades of experience. Prior to joining Quest Alliance, Senthil worked for GESI, which is the Global E-Schools and Community Initiative. It's a UN-founded initiative. He has also worked with Azim Premji Foundation in the past and also SchoolNet India Limited. Before moving into the development sector, Senthil has worked for 9 years in the corporate sector as well. He has significantly contributed to system-wide and deep ICT integration in education and skills development for 20 countries across Asian and African continent. Welcome aboard, Senthil. Very, very glad to have you here as well. Great. So you want to just all say a quick hello and put on your videos? I'm not being able to see Senthil and Kumkum yet.
I am on video.
Okay, now
on video, Nikita.
Okay, great. Awesome to have all 3 of you all here. It was a great conversation. You all heard, the 2 representatives from the government talk about the work the ministries are thinking about and doing already. They spoke briefly about, their role. They expect some of the practicing organization, the private companies to play, in supporting the government better and making this transition to these newer learning realities, right? So my first question to all of you, and I'll come to each one of you all one by one, is given in the light of the conversations that just happened in the last 30 minutes, how do you, one, as you heard the government officials speak and the representatives speak and their expectations of us as practitioners, what is your thought around that? And how do you see and view your role as practitioners, as companies in this space of trying to work with ITIS systems very closely, bring about a certain systemic reforms? Over to you. Maybe Kumkum, I'll start with you first. If you could share some thoughts around that. From a Cisco,
sure,
or even actually not just Cisco perspective, but the role of private companies and how they can support government systems and learning systems better. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Nikita, and glad to meet you, Senthil and Nikhil. I guess with the introductions you shared, Nikita, I think we all cross over or would have worked on in some form of a relationship with each other, being on the different sides of the table. So it was pretty interesting for me as well. And, I guess this whole, even for what Dr. Jayaprakash said and the director sir said, it crossovers a lot with what we all are doing in our spaces, from the transition to, you can say, from education to skills and then skills to jobs. So I guess that whole chain is where we are intervening in different levels. And what I picked up from both of their discussion, and for over the last 1.5 years trying to move everything virtual in terms of running a skilling program at a pan-India level, I guess one of the things which comes out is, one, definitely the trainer readiness and the trainer, or you can say the trainer of trainer model, and the capacity building there. So I think that is one area which builds onto the sustainability of any digital learning program, be it technical, be it non-technical, and with trying to move it virtual to all virtual, there's a lot of change that has happened in last 18 months in terms of learning and teaching, content, delivery, and then outcomes. So in that sense, I guess, from speaking of from where technology companies and from where Cisco comes in, is one could be, to have a lot of on-ground understanding of the barriers itself. First of all, you did lay out, cultural versus infrastructural issues, and to have the deep understanding of them is really important for technology companies who are sitting a little, 2 steps far from there. So even in terms of the Cisco Networking Academy courses, which are digital technical skills courses for higher education age group, we have a set of partners who work on ground, and these partners are again higher education institutions. So, for example, in Tamil Nadu, there will be 2 organizations which are our partner entities to work across polytechnics, colleges, ITIs in Tamil Nadu. So, I guess they really keep us honest in knowing what the pulse on the ground is, and even in terms of the kind of skills, the kind of courses you're offering. So, in NetAcad, we have a portfolio of courses across cybersecurity, networking, IoT, and bunch of other things. But we've seen a lot of trend change in terms of even what specific courses are in demand, or the demand has been changing for. So something which was very popular before 18 months was a course called IoT or IT Essentials, which is like really good for employment in tier 2, tier 3 cities. So that program today is not in demand because it required a lot of physical lab work. And with all the education institutions have been shut down, there is a move towards a lot of other courses like networking plus cybersecurity, and with also the demand increasing from the whole work from home revolution, or the demands in security, the lot more cyber attacks. And I think it's also the narrative shift that we need to move from harder IT skills to these are also equally important skills like security and cloud and other networking based courses. So I guess that pulse and that change is quite interesting to see. We might think that we have these bunch of 20 courses which will keep running for the next 10 years, but with changes like the pandemic, it's changing every day, and it's different for states, it's different for polytechnics versus colleges. And with that keeping in mind, I guess then you need to intervene at the trainer of trainer level and the instructor training level. So that part has to be held on to like really close. So I'll pause there to hear comments or take divergence from here.
No, that was very interesting, Kumkum, what you shared, and completely resonate with a lot of what you said as well. I'll actually jump off also from here to Nikhil. Nikhil, for an organization like Samagra, who works, so closely with the government system, focusing on governance. You guys work across sectors, not just skilling and education, but even health and other aspects of it, right? So being so close and being so much integrated into the system, but not really, being the government yourself, how you guys have a great ability to influence a lot of things, right? So how are you seeing the role of an organization like Samagra to really, help in bringing this readiness in learning ecosystems to adapt to this new reality of the future?
Thanks a lot, Nikita, and thank you to everyone for also logging in and listening to all of us. So to answer your question, so as Samagra, we work with the senior political and bureaucratic leadership, ministers, chief ministers, the principal secretaries, and so on, of different states, and also increasingly central government as well, to solve for governance issues at scale. So hence across sectors. So from the time we are approached with the problem statement, which usually is very abstract in nature, that, okay, let's do something about skilling in a state X. That's the kind of problem statement usually governments come up with. So from the time we receive that, we co-work with the government to first diagnose what are all these issues, try and narrow down the problem statement, try and figure out what are the different levers that are affecting those issues, then design a 2 to 3 year roadmap. Nothing can be solved in, okay, let's do it over the next 3 months, let's do it over the next 5 months. It is a long roadmap. So we take that time to put together that design, and then again co-work with the department or whatever is the relevant government entity to kind of see through the implementation of the same. So these transformation programs usually consist of both technical and governance levers. Right. Say since we are talking about skilling, if I talk about the work that we are doing in Haryana on skilling, we are talking about what kind of courses the ITIs need to run, which would be a very technical call to be taken, to also saying how many trainers need to be recruited and how should they be recruited. That's a governance lever. So putting together this holistic strategy is what we believe will kind of move the system that much further. Coming to the specific question of blended learning itself, as to what is the role that we envision ourselves to be playing. One, there are a lot of open questions because of the uncertainties itself. Right. A lot of things that we in the pre-COVID world took for granted can no longer be taken for granted. and these very small things. So I think the larger question that all of us as an ecosystem need to answer for today is, what does skilling look like in today's world? We used to talk about these three components that skilling has. There's a theoretical component, there's a practical component, and there's an on-the-job training (OJT) component. Theoretical, we can still probably move maybe a part of it online, make it self-learning modules and through LMS and so on. What about the practical and OJT? Both the government officers as well spoke a lot about some things cannot be done away with, which is the practical and on-the-job training. Now, in today's world, how do we imagine that? So that's a large question. What we are attempting to do is, our learning has been that no one organization, one person, one group of people can solve for this. And hence we have partnered with the Quest, with Udhyam, with Medha Foundation, multiple such organizations coming together with their own perspective, their own learning, their own organizational strength to collaboratively figure out what is the answer for tomorrow. And our learning really has been that this is what is working out right now, at least for us, that coming together of these organizations to collaboratively figure out the answer is what we believe will yield the best results.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And I think completely resonate on the idea that it needs to be a more holistic and slightly more long-term view to the problem. And I guess trying to solve it immediately is not going to happen, but I guess more incrementally, bit by bit. So thank you for sharing that, Nikhil. Senthil, coming to you next, any quick thoughts on the role of civil society organizations in supporting the government better, role of collectives like an FRSN in this case, or any other collaboratives that are functioning? Any quick thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, thanks, Nikita. So thanks to Kumkum and Nikhil, my co-panelists, and also those who logged in to listen to us. Yeah, it's very interesting to listen to the to government officials, both at the state level and the central or federal. It depends on the state where you come from, you call central or federal. And it's very important to get their insights in terms of the core challenges. Like Nikhil pointed out, so no one organization has got the solution to address and solve all that. The huge amount of diversity, what we face, and the context of, especially we are looking at the sudden schooling system, like the massive 1.56 billion learners suddenly losing 300 billion days of learning. And it's taking back some of those Millennium Development Goal learning of taking minus 10% in terms of the learning outcome. The crisis is really serious. We are looking at the 10 million girl children may not be getting into the school. So that's the vulnerability we are looking at. When one side we are talking about the girl child enrollment or girl student women enrollment into ITA systems. So that's the segment of underprivileged, the last mile, or the neglected or marginalized, mostly get into that kind of ITA ecosystem. And those 10 million are seriously looking at the kind of early marriage, child marriage kind of crisis at this point of time. So we are really looking at kind of the massive crisis. So how we are going to collaboratively work and help the system. So though the government has got a huge mandate, and we talked about the statistics of like 15,000 to 16,000 ITIs, and about 25% of them belongs to government. So 75 is still the private. But still government holds the regulatory framework. So you as a private, so you cannot do what you want to do. So because the regulatory control is still with the government. So in a way, unless we work collaboratively with partner, and each state has got broadly certain framework for this multi-stakeholder engagement. So certain states say that, we just do it, will inform you what we are doing. So that probably those days have gone. And so then the next set of, a lot more in terms of how we consult with these different set of organization, more of the technical assistance and collaborate. And the third is what actually it's important to look at the more involve and collaborate stage, like Nikhil pointed out in the Haryana example. So it's a lot more deeper engagement in terms of involving and collaborating, collectively trying to see what are those problem statement, and trying to work around more of the policy or strategy, more importantly, the costed strategy. So we have seen beautiful policies sleeping in the cupboard. And the serious issue is that when it comes to implementation, whether the system designed or capacitated to really visualize the amount of challenges ahead. So this is where we also talked about how the officials, government officials, brought in about the leadership capacity or the lack of capacity among the trainers to really deal, or the quality of content, the training, the delivery, and addressing it periodically, not keeping it redundant for a year, or the longer period of time, the industry connect. In a way, so try to solve some of those issues, the Future Right Skills Network, trying to put together a platform and trying to bring in the like-minded collective set of organizations to see how we can collaboratively work with the state government and solve some of these issues. So, and we also put out at this point of time kind of a roadmap. So the critical roadmap on a priority basis, what we could address. So the issues, what they have highlighted in terms of the alumni or family or the community engagement, the employer, the industry connect, the leadership, it's all part of the current ecosystem, what actually the FRSN is designed to address. So we hope with that kind of for the openness from the government and the like-minded partners coming together, and we have a great, challenging and exciting time ahead to help to transform this youth skill through a sort of institutionalizing sustainable and scaling model to bring that to the transformation, youth skill transformation, what we are looking for.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that there is going to be sort of a role across the board at all, for all areas. Nikhil touched upon the fact that you need to work with people at different levels as well for some of this to work. So yeah, a lot of interesting points being made. Nikhil, coming to you next, a question I had is that I think over the last 2 days of QDL as well, we've had a lot of conversations around how do we really get our educators ready and the mindsets. And I think, some of the government representatives also spoke about the fact that it's a challenge that continues to be there, right? And especially when you look at the instructors in an ITIS setup, they are very slightly been there for a long time. They have a certain way of functioning, certain way of teaching. So, the mindsets are of a certain, are geared to do certain teaching learning processes. So one, we all recognize that, equipping them, these trainers and bringing these mind shifts is very critical. So wanting to understand that for you, how do you see, what are some of these barriers when it comes to us actually trying to build this mindset shift for educators? So if you could touch upon the barriers. The other, just a second part of my question, and I'll then give it over to you, is that in order to even bring about that mindset shift for trainers, right? Just working with trainers is not going to be enough, right? Because they're also still situated in the larger ecosystem. They're still part of a whole bunch of other stakeholders and in the system, right? So how do even organizations like Samagra work towards even bringing a certain mindset shift in the government system with the officials as well, to be able to create a certain conducive environment for this shift to happen, right? So what kind of policies and processes are being shifted? How are we looking at reimagining some of it? So it's sort of the two parts are that one, how are we looking at some of the what are some of the challenges that we are forcing in bringing this mindset shift for trainers? And secondly, how are you guys also working with the system overall and the government officials to really work on their mindsets at the same time? So,
yeah. So let me answer the first part of the question first. And I'm, in fact, when we spoke the other day where you shared the topic, I was discussing with the team as well, which is working on some of these things. So some of the learnings are coming from there. So let me quickly set context of what is happening. So in Haryana, as soon as the lockdown started, end of March last year, the state almost head-on went into the thing about, okay, we need to keep the learning going. Because of course, at that point in time, the expectation was, okay, this is a 1 or 2 month thing. ITIs will open up. The final exams were in any case due in July. So they thought, okay, maybe 1 month later, but let's continue the learning. So the department almost head on went into it and said, okay, how do we keep the learning going on? So work very closely with them to get all the material that is there online, including the one, say, Bharat Skills Network that Dr. Jayaprakash earlier spoke about. Right. Curate all of that. Some of them were also crowdsourced. Set up almost 2,000 odd WhatsApp groups across the state, bring all the ITI kids on them in a cascaded manner, have a whole, paraphernalia for it, master trainers, people curating, people rating content, and then just share all of that through these WhatsApp groups on every week. And every week there was also an assessment that was happening via WhatsApp. So in some cases, in the education sector, we used WhatsApp bots. I'm assuming the other day, Convergenius, Shashank Pandey would have spoken about it a bit, something like that. In the skilling, we used more Google Forms because that was more easier to administer. But these micro innovations is what helped us. Almost 70% of the students we were able to keep engaged during this period, just by doing this. Of course, the claim is not that fundamental great learning happened because of it. But keeping them engaged on content is what was achieved. Over a period of time, though, this engagement started tapering off.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I'm basing my learning on. Through this experience, what we realized was that as of today, there are actually fewer mindset barriers to move to technology. And I think Mr. Raghava, the director, mentioned himself that all of us also have taken on to technology, and everybody in our community has taken on to technology. Whether it's the street vendor or the CEO of a company, everybody has had to learn on the go. And the same is true for government folks as well. Right. Our experience has not been that there was even the barest of resistance to move to technology, because everybody understood that there is no other way of working in this world. But what really mattered is skill and access. Access, I think we have spoken about, it's also a well understood thing. The one point that I would make on access is it is also layered access. Like women have very different access to smartphones than men would have. A certain age group would have very different kind of access than somebody else. So that I'm not touching upon. By skill, I mean is how is content designed and how it is delivered by educators. That is not something that we have figured out yet. And that is true for the ecosystem as well. As of today, most people, even in the core education sector, are just moving teaching online. I will have all the kids sit in a Zoom class. I will speak the way I spoke.
Right.
But this is actually not conducive if you think about it. Right. You can no longer show a piece of paper and say, here is XYZ. It's not seen for the person who's watching on probably a phone or a distant screen. So the learning is not the same. As an extension, earlier, the way content is designed. Earlier, you could say, turn to page 46, see slide number, image number 1. This is how a welding machine looks. Yeah. No longer relevant now. But that's exactly what most people would be doing as an inherent thing. Okay, let me do my classes online.
Yeah.
Now, this is what I mean by skilling, is how do we design this content now to be able to move across digital medium, and how do we empower the educator to change their way of thinking of how delivery happens. It's not like they're not open. They just don't know how else to do it.
No, again, great insight on the fact that, the curriculum that we had for physical spaces are not going to work virtually as is. And I think that shift and adapting that curriculum to that space and building on the strengths virtual provides is very, very critical. And I think just as Haryana WhatsApp groups were definitely a talk of the town everywhere. I think how the government just put them together overnight.
Yeah.
But I feel like, the other piece is also that what's happening in Haryana, I'm not sure how much of it is actually happening in other states as well. So I don't know if you've got insights from other states,
So, not as deeply, of course, because we are not directly involved, but there have been examples of different states trying out the same thing.
Right.
And I know for sure in the education space, a lot of states have done this. I know Rajasthan has done it. I know Madhya Pradesh has done it. Chhattisgarh has done it. Odisha has done it. Multiple states in education space I'm aware of. Skilling, not much. But there would be some states who are doing something or the other. It's not like even governments like, okay, now hamara kaam nikal gaya. That's not how they operate. They are also wanting to make the change that we are all working on as well.
Super.
To close out on my point, that's what I meant earlier when I said that a lot of things we had taken for granted that when you sit in a classroom, you take a lot of things for granted. Those are exact things that we can no longer take for granted anymore.
Completely agree with that. Thank you, Nikhil, for sharing that. Coming to you, Kumkum, next. I think the question I had for you is that I know, like, for example, for Cisco Digital, and the focus on digital is huge, right? Like, you guys are investing in a big way on setting some kind of a digital infrastructure, or even investing in it. You're also like looking to create more digital platforms and digital content. But I feel like, the issue is that the digital divide and the lack of access of digital devices is huge, right? Like, we spoke about the fact that there's still 60% of the country which does not have internet access, right? So while private companies can do their bit, this problem is actually, much bigger to be solved, and probably government has a much bigger role to play. So what do you see as the role of private companies like a Cisco or any other, right? Like, in this space, that like, where should your investments be going if you're trying to figure like this digital device kind of a gap? Like, where should you be investing as companies? Because I would imagine that you can't solve for this problem at a country level, and government may have to do that. But then if you have investments and you're inclined to do it, then where should this be going?
Sure. No, the most important, I think, question and elephant in the room as well and then we all brought it up that, there are layers of divide and then a lot of intersectionality playing in with the gender, with the class and caste, and so many other things, which, like, I don't think most of us even understand in depth. So I guess it will be interesting to step back a little and say that, so the Cisco Networking Academy course, which is a CSR EdTech program, you can call, has been there for 23 years, and it has always been digital and blended. So when the pandemic hit, the question was not to how to, like, we did not struggle with changing the content of pedagogy, because even before pandemic, it was a blended learning program. And at that time, whenever we used to go to the governments, they used to ask us that, why should we invest in instructor training? Why should we invest our ITI instructors to get trained for 3 months, 4 months first, and then they teach the students? Why don't you give us your instructors? And we don't want to do this. And the same thing came from polytechnics, from a lot of colleges as well. And a lot of governments questioned this, that why do you want to do it the difficult way? Just give us the courses, give us the content, and host it on our portal, and we are good to go. And we will reach masses, just like how Coursera can do it, edX can do it, and a lot of other companies can do it. But since inception only, the whole NetAcad model was blended learning, and we never diluted it. So when pandemic hit, initially, this instructor training part became a big challenge. But eventually, when people started understanding that, MOOCs is not the gold standard on its own. And when you look at the completion rates, retention rates, they're roughly 5 to 6% across the board. And then when we looked at our completion rates of blended learning, they go from somewhere from 50 to 80% in different cases. So then we could show that to the governments that, this is a reason we were always telling you to get your instructor training done, instructor certifications done, the value add done at that level. So that is one part where I feel the tech companies who have academy programs, huge academy programs, for example, so NetAcad reaches 3 lakh students across India, across the higher education space. So, and a lot of other tech companies have programs like this. So this will be one area definitely where the tech company has capacity to invest in, is the instructor training and capacity level, and to make the government counterpart understand the value of it as well, and not just for the sake of signing MOUs, go and do whatever feels right in the moment. And then these key partnerships with Bharat Skills portal and AICTE and different level of penetration, that has always been our model of work. So in that case, there was not a lot for us to change with the pandemic. The other part which was very important is to look at employability as one of the outcomes of any skilling program, especially if it's coming from a tech company. They're claiming that they have a program which is skilling the youth in these 5 things or 6 things and making them employable. But then we need to go and ask all of them that, where's the employability? Are you yourself hiring these students or not? So in that case, I guess Cisco has tried to, adapt to that answer in different ways of hiring college students from the remotest parts of the country who have done these skilling courses. And it was even a big breakthrough for Cisco itself, being in the hiring space, to have hired these students as full-time employees who are not from the top 20 or 30 colleges of the country. And then coming to apprentices, where now that the government has mandated for big tech companies to hire a percentage of their 2% of their full-time workforce as apprentices for 6 to 12 months. So even that program is newly adopted by Cisco, where these NetAcad students have come and joined Cisco for apprentices. And much more, going on, trying to happen on the employability space. So I think those two areas for me at least stand out for any kind of skilling program or workforce development program to be sustainable and to be impactful, even to start with calling themselves being impactful.
Sure. No, that was very, very useful to hear. In the interest of time, Senthil, I'll quickly come to you. My question to you is that, delving deeper into this barrier around, less women participation in ITIs and even having less access. Nikhil also touched upon it when he was talking about it. So, we speak about the fact that some of it is actually to do with the lack of devices and the digital divides, and even just the economic, status of different individuals. But I think a lot of it, when it comes to women, is also about the social aspects that play a role alongside, right? Like, even if there's an access to smartphone at home and access to internet, etc., but would the woman learner at home get access is still a big question, right? So there are several social factors which prevent that from happening. And I think as a result, a lot of us have resorted to doing fair bit of family engagement, parent engagement kind of programs in our capacities in the institutes and the ITIs. But again, what kind of a role do you see of the government, right? Because I feel like, the acceptability of learning digitally, and I know parents may have fears around cyber security, that could be preventing them from allowing girl child or women to learn online. But even if you just leave aside the cyber security related concerns, the social aspects that prevents, and I think if government steps into something like this and says that, okay, every learner needs to spend 15 hours in a week or a month on virtual learning, and it sort of becomes mandated, so there's a greater acceptability that happens by the parents as well, that it is something that is needed to be done. So how do you think this whole engagement with parents can be driven by government systems at large scale, when we can continue to do our bits in demonstrating the requirement and the need of it? But how does government look at parent engagement and family engagement at large scale is my question, and any thoughts around that if you have.
Thanks, Nikita. Yeah, that's in fact very serious issues. I must tell you that already about 132 million girls sitting at home, not getting into the school, and this crisis adding another 10 million into that, and at home. And there is the huge amount of challenge. One is that around 2.7 billion women not legally allowed to work across the world in many countries. So that puts a serious barrier. And when it comes to the Indian context, something like I would classify under maybe 3 layers. One, at the personal level among the girls. So how they see the surroundings and a lack of role model. And maybe I can give you one concrete example. I did my mechanical engineering 87, 91 way back. And the first time when I saw a girl stepping into a classroom, so that in the US, we never seen a girl in mechanical engineering. So that was kind of the role model for many. So 32 years down the line. There are many, the percentage of for the women in mechanical engineering significantly increased. So somewhere that who is that one person can be a role model, can actually these girls can look upon. And then the serious issue in terms of the family, and it's a very stereotype and gendered, like, the home care and family care kind of thing. Average, probably you may also look at some statistics, something like 2 of times of in terms of the percentage of time, if we look at the women is engaged in some of those the home care kind of work. And that's actually very stereo gender type. So you just mold them that, don't step them out of that comfort, that kind of zone. So that's a serious issue. So the next step to the institutional level, probably when you come to the institutional level, one, I could see that any of those, the textbook showing a girl welding or a girl doing the auto electric kind of thing. So how even in the textbook, the government can actually, or the institution, take a step. When you go to the institute for a career counseling, there are certain things actually barred, so this only for men can do. So how you can break that kind of the institutional and even the labor market? So that's another regulatory framework comes into play. And there are organizations that are very categorically outlined that it's only men should apply for this kind of. So how we can actually get that the regulatory framework in action to eliminate and encourage that kind of the equal participation when it comes to. And forget about the senior, the women leadership at the senior level, where the top 500 companies only 5% women at the top. So I'm looking at those that the marginalized, looking for a livelihood, encourage that kind of girls to step in. This is where the third the dimension in terms of the social factors comes in. How we collectively work together as a community, as a family, as a government, all, and make sure that we break those silos, bring the policy coherence. We encourage all those systems to work collaboratively. So therefore, it's a collective action required. And ensure that at the institutional level, there is a good support, at the home level, good support. Even I was just calculating, as actually Dr. JP was mentioning about some statistics. So something like, we are looking at 2.5 million, 25 lakhs total student in the government institutions all across India. So 90,000 girls we are looking at. Exclude Tamil Nadu, those who come after 12th standard, they get a laptop. So that was my post on the chat also to Mr. Viragov. After 10th, those who get in. So it's like 1 year, full devices and the access charges. It will cost 100 crore, which is nothing for India. And also Dr. JP mentioned about, money is not an issue. So consider, put it part of this cost. It's not a policy, put into cost of strategic plan into action. That is very important. So 100 crore for those girl child to motivate, get an access to digital device and get them on board with the digital learning is nothing for government of India. So look at that. So these are all the enabling factor after the regulatory framework. We should collectively advocate as a partners and educate, some of those statistics. When we look at the 100 crores, a few number, it may look big. But if you can encourage, so you bring all those women into the workforce, the economy, what they can drive. So I was just looking at the 57% of work women force in Sweden. If you can get all those, the whole world into that level, by every year, we will increase the economy by 6 trillion. Yeah. So that's the amount of the economy it can bring in. So the other side, we just continue to lag behind, and so we are falling behind 2030, the SDG 4, and this pandemic created. We need another about $148 billion every year to support this what pandemic has created. Unless we do the holistic support, encourage from the school, like that is one of the requests from the Tamil Nadu government. We need to encourage the girls from the secondary school education and give the career opportunities, career guidance. So therefore, the 0.3 or 0.4% of that enrollment at least can increase. So I think it's a collective action required. It's access to devices, not an issue. And work with those service provider, and they would be very happy to subsidize the cost for the girl children, girl students. So this is where the corporate, the government, and the not-for-profit NGO should come together and work and make that kind of the women, the gender mainstreaming required at that IT ecosystem.
Sure. And just if you want to add any quick best practices that you've seen in the African continent on how, practitioners and government are engaging with each other, and how is that functioning? But you'll have to be brief, Senthil. We are already at 1:30, and I do want to close this in the next 5 minutes.
There are different models, and in fact, so there are, for example, maybe at the continental level, the African Union Commission has got the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. Every 10 years they roll out, And there are 12 set of clusters, and this is where they bring in all the partners. So for example, I've been very actively involved in the 2016 to 2025, the ICT in Education cluster. There are 255 member body across the world, part of that ICT in Education cluster, we were chairing it. So this as an organization, we were completely bringing all the partners together, the collective voice. It gets into the continent level for the policy advice, then it gets into the country level for more strategic plan, and gets into a lot more operationalizing under 3 categories in terms of how at the bottom institutionalize it, at the next layer how you can sustain it with set of expert working group, at the very senior level how all the partners come together as a program partners group. So continuously look at the resource gap optimization of the talent and the resource. So there are different models. The World Bank has created tons of tools to help, and there are tools like total cost of ownership developed by UN agency, like I was actively involved, which helps government to work out every micro detail based on the limited resource, how you can make a difference into the whole pedagogical change and the learning outcome or the skill development. So there are plenty of models available, probably positive time. So let me stop here and we will probably continue to interact and engage. Yeah.
Any links? Yeah. Just Kumkum, Nikhil, last words from you on what is that you expect from the government, as their support that they can provide to organizations like us to support the systems better. But yeah, very quickly in like 1 minute each.
I can say it first because my ask is very simple, which is like access and that long-term partnership at all levels. It's important to have that central level partnership which we spoke about with someone like MSD or DGT, but also equally important to then go down at the state level and see how the implementation and get in depth with that. So I guess that access and that continuity is the most important thing when we partner with the government, and with the frequent changes of personnel and those things, it just slows down the pace and impact of things which can be done together. So yeah.
Thank you. Nikki.
First, I think.
Voice, I think.
Is this better?
Much better. Go ahead.
Okay. This is one of those nuanced issues of blended learning that we.
There has to be one tech glitch for sure.
Yeah. So I think first and foremost is figuring out what skilling in today's world looks like, and I think government, both center and state, can really play the role of this umbrella organization which will pull all people together to figure that answer out. And then, of course, different organizations play different roles in that. I think that's the first thing. The second one, I think I would look at this also as an opportunity to start with what, say, the PMKVY 4.0 has started, which is to decentralize further and let organizations, districts, small skilling centers really learn on the go and meet the demands of today. Earlier, when the domain started back in 2015, when the institution was first started setting up, everything was decided at the top, then it would get implemented, then there was feedback. It was a long chain, and India is obviously a very diverse and very large system. And slowly that has started moving towards local skilling centers being able to meet the local demand. I think if we can continue on that journey, that also will take care of what should organizations do. Once that incentive changes, that you are going to meet the local demand, organizations also will start adapting to what is required.
Super. That was a super note to sort of bring an end to this panel. I'm not going to attempt to summarize what we spoke about, but I do want to end this with a quote that I think really resonates with the conversations today, is that if you do not understand your role in the problem, it is difficult to be part of the solution. So on that note, thank you so much to all of you to make the time to be here with us.